I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. I've kind of thing that if you sort of just read what Deirdre Brady had to say about her time in prison and about her conviction for money laundering, you would have felt sorry for her and you would have thought that she was this kind of very meagre, sort of, mild-mannered woman who was terrified of the cartel and would have done anything, okay? Now, that is one side of it, and I don't disagree that I understand why you wouldn't go up against Thomas Bomber Kavanagh and his ilk.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she did enjoy the money. It wasn't a hardship to launder the money. In laundering the money, she did have a lifestyle herself. And where did she think it was coming from? And obviously, holidaying in Mallorca in the private villa, being able to spend the kind of money she did on a family wedding and pick up a bar tab of 27,000 with cash. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dilemma. Like, I mean, how guilty are the people who live off the proceeds of crime? I mean, I don't think anybody would suggest that Deirdre Brady was involved in the criminal side of her husband's business. Obviously, Deirdre Brady is the wife of Declan Brady, who probably is most known by the nickname Mr. Nobody. And he was given that nickname, I think, because he managed to stay under the radar for a huge amount of time. He was certainly the Thomas Bomber Kavanagh's number one really manager. Mm-hmm. And despite that really high up level being in the cartel, he seemed to have attracted almost no Garda attention, no attention from rivals, and really managed to operate for, well, we don't know how long, but possibly for decades.
He lived like an ordinary businessman, claimed to be just running a logistics firm, a transport firm, was married to Deirdre. They had a nice home. They were able to entertain people together. He was at the same time had a mistress, a lady called Erica Lucas, who was also caught up in it. And he was keeping her, and he was living this secret life as Bomber Kavanagh's main logistic transport and warehousing guy.
Yeah, and that's what Thomas Bomber Kavanagh did, and we saw that with a couple of the guys who were convicted of him with him in the UK, who'd also really been under the radar and hadn't been these high profile figures like maybe some of us like the Burns or Fat Freddie Thompson,
the Wick Whelan or whoever.
Wick Whelan. He kept these guys who really were probably slightly smarter and slightly more restrained, and they hadn't seemed to have been penetrated by the police up until the violence really broke out with the feud. So
I think, to be clear, we're saying that Deirdre Brady wasn't involved in the criminal end of her husband's business, right? Or Kavanagh, ultimately, yeah. Thomas Kavanagh's business. Money laundering is a key part of the business, okay? Now just park that. I think what she wasn't involved in, and the appeals judge, actually, Mr. Justice Edwards, said that in her case, in her money laundering case, the evidence does not suggest the respondent had any detailed knowledge of the organisation which her husband was involved in, or concerning precisely what criminal activity it was engaged in. The respondent was nonetheless aware that her husband was receiving undeclared income from what, at the very least, she must have suspected to be criminal activities. So, and I think that's probably correct for most of the women that are living off the proceeds of crime. I actually attended the courts in the UK when Bomber Kavanagh he pleaded guilty along with Gary Vickery and Daniel Canning. And in the case of Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, his partner, his wife, Joanne Byrne, was there in attendance. And also Gary Vickery's partner was there in attendance. And it struck me like, while they could have kind of always claimed to know nothing of what was going on, they did have an extraordinary lifestyle. I mean, absolutely extraordinary lifestyle. The day they sat in court when they pleaded guilty on these charges of, wholesale drug distribution and money laundering, it was Daniel Canning actually pleaded guilty to a weapons charge as well. Like, they could be under no illusion. They were saying, yes, we did do this. But even up to that point, what do they think they were doing? Like selling secondhand cars? I mean, seriously,
Well,
you don't live a lifestyle like that from nothing. I mean, we are all living in the modern world, and people know that kind of money, I always say, it's drug money.
Yeah, well, look, it was actually a great interview by our colleague Patrick O'Connell, who spoke to Deirdre Brady on the weekend and was published in the Sunday World newspaper.
Yeah, let's go through what she has to say.
Well, let's see, this is her defence, I suppose. She says,
should we first of all just go over what she was actually convicted of? So when she was being sentenced, the court heard that Declan Brady and his wife had laundered criminal cash through transfers of money that included mortgage payments on a Spanish holiday property, this wedding in the Druids Glen, which, included a bar tab of 27,000 paid for in cash. And both of them declared no income whatsoever during this period of time. Now, there were 17 laundering offences, and they were committed between January 2014 and December 2014. And they involved concealing or disguising the true nature or source of 770,000, which had been the proceeds of criminal conduct. So she was basically moving money around a number of accounts. She was moving money over to Thomas Bomber Kavanagh and facilitating the payment of monies into a property in Mallorca, because, of course, the Bradys owned the house next door to the Kavanaghs in Calador in Mallorca, one of the most exclusive resorts on the island.
I mean, one of the incredible things about it is, like, that amount of money, it was just a tiny snapshot, wasn't it?
It's only 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, so that's an incredible thing to start off as.
Yeah.
However, like, when you read what she says, like, she basically says that she married Declan when she was 20 years old, and that they were married for over 30 years, and that he was self-employed, that he drove trucks, that, that there wasn't anything obvious. Like, he knew these people from school. I mean, we know many people who can pal around with criminal figures that are not criminals, that might know these people and grow up.
Does he speak for yourself?
Well, I mean, look, there's people, I know played football with major criminal figures and just played football with them, and they aren't criminals. So maybe that's what she's saying. She's saying that when the house got raided, as the pressure came on the cartel and she was told it was for guns, she nearly dropped off her seat, or whatever term she used, and that she's ashamed and that it shouldn't have happened, and that, her neighbours won't talk to her. And, like, what it is that can happen to human beings, that they start turning a blind eye to things that are going on around them, and the abnormal can appear normal over a period of time. Now, we see this in all sorts of areas. We see it in like, say, in the church or in other organisations, and you're in the middle of it, and, all of a sudden these things creep in, and a lot of people under a lot of conditions don't say, no, stop, this isn't right, I'm taking a moral stance. A lot of people, a lot of the time, they get sucked in. So
they kind of like some of the rewards that come with it. Yeah, they like the holidays. Yeah. They like the handbags. They like having a few 100,000 in their bank accounts as opposed to waiting to get paid 100%, every month. 100%.
And they like switching off, and they switch off that little bit of their brain that says this isn't right. And, I don't think, in fairness to her, she's saying, I don't know if she's saying she's not saying I did nothing wrong and I'm a victim. She's saying, that she's saying that she was, she was told
she wouldn't have said no because she was afraid of who they were. That bit I can understand.
Yeah, she was told to do it. She must have been in that position at that time when it became obvious she was being asked to move this money. She was told to do it and she didn't say no. Now, in part, you could say, well, then you are responsible, because if she could say these people were scary enough that you didn't say no to them, you knew what was going on. But it probably is, in a broader sense, beyond just talking about her, like, this is kind of how organised crime works, isn't it? It's where people get into this, they get sucked into this culture and it seems normal. And that can go all the way up to shooting and killing people, you know?
And you know, the thing was with Declan Brady, right? So, of course, he was at the funeral of David Byrne in the background. He didn't wear the uniform. He stood back. It was January 2017 when that arsenal of weapons was found in a factory he controlled in Greenogue. And those weapons were primed and ready for use at like the most frightening part of that feud. There was targets, human beings, who were identified by both Daniel Kinahan and Thomas Bomber Kavanagh for death.
Yeah.
The cartel bosses were essentially choosing who lived and who died. And Declan Brady was right there facilitating that.
And remember that did like those, there were innocent victims killed as a result of that weaponry. There was, you know, innocent people who were shot by accident or whatever. Yeah. So these, there's no knowing. And there was many other people that were...
And there was people who were shot dead who left behind children.
Yeah.
Perhaps they had some involvement in crime. Perhaps they didn't.
Yeah.
But they left behind what's going to affect generations.
Absolutely. And soft targets as well, killed.
I don't know how you live with that, to think that your loved one is murdered in cold blood like that. And, you know, sisters, uncles, cousins, neighbours, all those people that are affected by it. But anyway, Declan Brady was facilitating that. I mean, he was running that warehouse. He was stashing those guns. He was presumably going to be involved in their onward distribution to the streets, where they could have caused untold amount of murder and heartache. He was making a lot of money doing that job. He was facilitating his wife with plenty of money and a nice lifestyle doing it. And he had, of course, then this mistress who was also caught up in the court proceedings, although she didn't go to jail for a custodial sentence, unlike his wife. But I saw him in court getting handed down a sentence. And some of these guys are hard men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they have an exterior that will not be cracked, and they definitely don't show any emotions. Declan Brady looked to me like he was about to burst out crying.
Yeah.
He was in bits. He was not comfortable at all with where he was. There had been a lot of evidence given in relation to the mistress. He was particularly concerned about leaving her.
Yeah.
Because she had a child that he felt needed him. I think they had a young child together. And, you know, he felt like a provider.
Yeah.
For the younger mistress, and presumably for his first family and his wife. And it was like as if he just wanted it all to go away. There was a disconnect with him.
Yeah.
I mean, he certainly wasn't something. He was sorry, but he was sorry he was caught.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. I could draw his face for you, the way it looked. It was like a child who was purely sorry that they were caught and was claiming to be sorry for all the rest of it, but they weren't really. They were sorry for themselves.
Do you ever see on you don't see it as much anymore, but I remember it used to be on Bebo. I'll do it standing on my back. They used to update it. When they get the prison sentence, you know, or you, you know, you can lock the locks, but you can't stop the clocks. And they were all bravado. Yeah, this is no problem. Doesn't matter what the guys were given, and they'd update the Revo page and say, "I don't care. I can do it, no problem."
Yeah.
So he wasn't like that. I'd say he had a
he
wasn't part of the plan. Like he had gone a long way without ever getting caught, without ever. Probably didn't feel he was likely to ever get caught, because if you remember, even in the Greenogue, I don't think he was found directly there, was he? There was complicated evidence, but he had other people doing, like he was directing other people, and he was involved mostly in logistics. He wasn't handling shipments of drugs, you know, so he had reached that level and gone that far that he probably really believed it wasn't going to happen. And she obviously, you know, there's no doubt she knew what was going on. To a degree.
But she knew that the money wasn't coming from hard work.
No, and she wasn't holidaying next to Thomas Bomber Kavanagh and thinking this guy is, what was he? What was he, a car salesman?
Exactly. And she certainly wasn't thinking that, you know, when they had, you know, matching villas on the waterfront in the most expensive part of Mallorca, side by side with the Kavanaghs, that she couldn't hardly think that her husband, if he was involved, that he wasn't very important. I mean, that is a very important place to be.
Yeah. But you can see how these things happen to people, and she may have met somebody else and married somebody else and might never have come across criminality in her whole life.
How does she feel about the mistress?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure not too good.
I'm sure not too good. I mean, a funny bit I did think was that she says going into the Docus, which is the female wing of Mountjoy Prison, wasn't that bad. Everybody was very nice to me. And of course they were very nice to you. You are who you are.
You are who you are, exactly.
Yeah. I feel sympathy for her. She's paid a price, Do
you feel sympathy for her because she's a woman?
I feel sympathy for her because, I can see...
Would you be saying that about a male money launderer?
Possibly not.
You see, I think that is actually it. And I know that a lot of the women were really rattled by the fact that she got that sentence, because I, will often speak to women in in the ether of that and their positions. And they do feel very safe and comfortable that it's the man that's going out there and taking those risks. And while they're living off essentially the proceeds of crime, traditionally the women have
they might
not gone to jail.
No, the assets might get seized, but...
and they might lose their handbags. Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, in a way, I think there's an ugliness to all that, to the women who take that money, turn a blind eye, and cannot be dripping in more jewellery and designer goods and stuff. I mean, surely there's a moral compass there somewhere that you would... I mean, you wouldn't want the bloody handbag, knowing where... Well, I just wouldn't.
No, actually...
I don't know whether it's just that I was brought up and I feel that you should go out and earn an honest living.
Yeah.
That is so deeply embedded in me. I'd say you're probably the same.
It is for me. I mean, I suppose I can...
And not everybody comes from as secure backgrounds maybe as we did, so it's probably unfair to judge like that. But
I mean, the prosecution said there was nothing to suggest she'd been under the coercive control of her husband. So that was said in court. However, there are people that can get dragged along by their partners, if they have partners of this strong personality. I think it is human to turn a blind eye to some of the flaws of the people in your life. I'm not saying it's okay, but I can understand. And she's paid her price.
I certainly saw a weakness in Declan Brady when I saw him. I saw a weakness in him. He looked like a weak man to me.
Yeah.
And well, you only get a glimpse of somebody maybe, but he did. He looked like a weak character, and
well, he may have been battered down by the time you saw him.
Yeah.
He can't have been that shy and retiring in order to reach the level he reached. Look, I don't know. I mean, it's funny though. It's the collateral damage, isn't it, to people's families? I don't know what was said about the mistress and all of that, but it didn't seem to be totally out in the open before he was caught by the
very
police.
Very secretive, the relationship.
Yeah.
He was obviously a sneaky guy. Like, I mean, in the end of the day, he was for sure that. But,
so the collateral damage of the whole thing, between his two families, kids, the granny, I think she says she's a granny of 7, all of those broken things that have happened now, and he'll be he got an 11-year sentence, didn't he? And he's in his mid to late 50s, I think. So, again, it's
he's going to miss out on a lot. Certainly,
going to miss out on a lot, and just the collateral damage spreading throughout that family. But it's nothing like you're right. It's nothing like the collateral damage of some of the victims that have been the innocent victims that were the victims of the Kinahan cartel, let alone the people who are, bereaved if people are involved in crime. So they get away with it, but it's a harsh price.
It's obviously in the case of Mrs. Brady, I think it's what the neighbours think that seemed to be the hardest part for her, that she's come back into this, and what her grandchildren saw her. And sorry, by the way, she has you to thank for that headline.
Yeah,
what was it?
I'm no gangster granny.
I'm no gangster granny. So
that's obviously a reference to the David Walliams book, you know.
Of course.
Yeah. Just
well, maybe she was quite happy with that, but
I think
you could frame it.
You could. Look, shame. That's another funny thing about all of this. Like, you know, that like she says, whatever about the Docus and that really, it's the public shame of it is the hardest bit to handle. That she didn't want to be a celebrity, she says. I'm a celebrity for all the wrong reasons. And I can understand that because people make mistakes. You see it all the time. And then all of a sudden it becomes public, and that is so hard for people to handle. You know,
I suppose as well, if you were,
whether you deserve it or not, and that's another thing about.
You were able to throw a wedding, you know, of the kinds that the Bradys were, and you were able to lord it up in your holiday home in Mallorca, and you could treat everybody to whatever else they did, and they had the nice cars and beautiful houses and everything. Losing them and the ability to pay for them and stuff might be actually really underneath it harder than the shame.
See, I don't think it is, you see. I think it's the shame is the bit that people like that. The
shame of what? The shame of them, the shame of the neighbours knowing that you were involved in criminality,
and the kids.
Or the shame of losing the money.
No, I
and
think
losing
the
status.
The shame of all of it, and realising, yeah, look, this is my own fault. And look where I am now. And to the day I die, that's what people are going to look at me and see, you know, people like you.
Yeah.
You're not compassionate people like me. But I think that is and you see it, Nicola.
You'd be a nicer neighbour than me.
I would. Well, I'd say hi.
Yeah.
But
I'd be going out rolling down the window.
But
when are you on your holidays?
But you see it, say, and obviously it's a totally different thing. I don't need to say that, but the RTE scandal.
Yeah.
You see the impact of that.
Mm-hmm.
It does have an impact. Do you know what I mean? And it has an impact even more so if for somebody maybe who'd lived a seemingly respectable life.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden to be brought down where, you know, at Freddie Thompson or somebody who's been in the papers all his life and doesn't have that. He's not, like, I'm sure it's not the same for somebody like that, I think. So there you go.
Okay, well, look, she spoke and she had her say and she made it onto the front page, and she doesn't like being a celebrity, but you made her an even bigger one.
Yeah.
And now she's appeared on Crime World. So, but I do have to say, I think what happened to her has worried a lot of women out there. And I think it's probably a bit of a blueprint as well going forward of how the courts are going to handle the women. And probably as well, it will encourage the Garda investigations to target the women as well. Because again, targeting every aspect of a drug gang and, you know, every part of how it operates is important going forward, really, and to sort of, I suppose, discourage others maybe.
Yeah, of course. And look, that's the problem with organised crime, that they need semi-innocent people or whatever to make it function. Do you know?
Exactly. Okay, well, there's another gangster's mall bites the dust.
But she's no Gangsta Granny.
She's no Gangsta Granny.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks,
Nicola.